God bless you, dear students. Today we are going to discuss about the poem Throwing a Tree, and it is written by Thomas Hardy. So let's know first of all something about the poet. Thomas Hardy was an English novelist and speaker. His writings show a great sense of respect and admiration for nature. In this poem, he describes a large, strong tree which has lived for some 200 years, as cut down by two woodcutters within a couple of hours. The poem shows a deep feeling of the tree and depicts its falling as an act of unfeeling cruelty. So, let's recite the poem. The two executioners stalk along over the knolls, bearing two axes with heavy heads, shining and white, and a long-limbed two-handled saw toothed for cutting great boughs. And so they approach the proud tree that bears the death mark on its side. Jackets doffed their sewing axes and chop away just above ground, and the chips fly about and lie white on the moss and fallen leaves, till a broad, deep gash in the bark is hewn all the way round, and one of them tries to hook upward a rope, which at last he achieves. The saw then begins till the top of the tall giant shivers. The shivers are seen to grow greater with each cut than before. They edge out the saw, tug the rope, but the tree only quivers, and kneeling and sawing again, they step back to try pulling once more. Then lastly the living mast sways, further sways with a shout. Job and Ike rush aside, reach the end of its long staying powers. The tree crashes downward, it shakes all its neighbors throughout, and 200 years' steady growth has been ended in less than 2 hours. So now I am going to explain the poem accordingly stanza wise. Okay, so as we already know about the poem that this poem is about nature, and the poet Hardy questions the technology just make the trees seem like they are alive, so that reader can understand or empathize more towards it being cut. So here the first stanza. The two executioners stalk along over the knolls, bearing two axes with heavy heads, shining and white, and a long-limbed two-handled saw toothed with for cutting great boughs, and so they approach the proud tree that bears the death mark on its side. So here the poet Thomas Hardy, he describes how a large, strong tree which has lived for many years is cut down by two woodcutters, and who march into the forest like executioners. Executioners means who carry out a death sentence. So they are both getting ready to bring the 200-year-old tree down, and they also carry an axe and a saw. So slowly and stealthily these woodcutters advance towards the 200 years old tree, and this tree has a fatal mark etched on one side, and this mark is the indicator that this tree is meant to be pulled down. Okay, now let's see the second stanza. Jackets doffed, they swing axes and chop away just above ground, and the chips fly about and lie white on the moss and fallen leaves, till a broad, deep gash in the bark is hewn all the way round, and one of them tries to hook upward a rope, which at last he achieves. Okay, so these woodcutters took off their jackets and began swinging their axes. They chopped on the tree trunk just a little above the ground, and small chips of wood just flew all around the two men. Then these white colored chips fell on the ground, and moss and fallen leaves lay just beneath the chips of wood. And very soon a deep cut is visible on the trunk of this 200-year-old tree, and the bark of the tree is chopped off from all sides, and one of the woodcutters now tries to throw a rope around the branches of the tree, and finally he manages to tie a rope around the tree and its branches. Now, third stanza. The saw then begins, till the top of the tall giant shivers. The shivers are seen to grow greater with each cut than before. They edge out the saw, tug the rope, but the tree only quivers, and kneeling and sawing again, they step back to try pulling once more. So next, the saw begins its work, and the top of this giant-sized tree starts shivering as the cut deepens, and the shivers become more and more intense due to the effect of the saw on the trunk of that tree. And the woodcutters remove the saw from beneath the half-slit trunk and pull the rope, and this tree shakes even more, and the men kneel down beside the tree and they start with their task of sawing again, and then they step back to try pulling the tree once more. Now the last stanza. Then lastly the living mast sways, further sways with a shout. Job and Ike rush aside, reach the end of its long staying powers. The tree crashes downward, it shakes all its neighbors throughout, and 200 years steady growth has been ended in less than 2 hours. Okay, so finally the entire body of the tree begins to shake, and it starts swaying with a great shout. Then two woodcutters, whose names are here Job and Ike, they both rush aside to protect themselves from the falling tree, and they shouted in excitement while moving away from this tree, and the tree lost its power to stand upright. It comes crashing towards the ground, and whatever is in the neighborhood, it also gets shaken as well. And after having stood tall for a period of 200 years, the tree loses its life in less than 2 hours. So this poem about nature ends over here, and it shows Hardy's relation, the poet's relation towards nature, that when nature is being harmed, it angers him. Okay, so as usual, to get the question answers, please go through the description box of this video, and again we'll meet with the next chapter in the next video. So till then, all the best.